Hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 of our 5-part series called The Hero's Journey. And we've got a lot of adventure to get to, so let's get started. So just quickly looking back at our second episode, last time we began the monomyth by studying the departure, the first of 3 major phases: departure, initiation, and return. And we looked at all 5 substages in the departure: the call, where our hero is sort of pulled out of their normal world; the refusal of the call, which almost always happens. Why would you want to leave everything you know and go into the unknown? Then the third substage, the supernatural aid. And through the literal lens, this is literally a wizard or a magic sword or something. But, psychologically, this is tapping into resources that you've had all along that you didn't know you had, because you had not yet been introduced to them. And Campbell goes further even and says that the supernatural aid, if the hero surrenders to their purpose, can be the entire cosmos itself. Everything starts to cooperate with you. That fourth substage, crossing the first threshold, 1 foot in one world, 1 foot in the other, and the threshold guardian, the monster, the barrier, that blocks the way. And the hero, again, either turns back and gives up or faces their fear and conquers that threshold guardian, and then and thereby demonstrates their readiness for the work ahead. And then finally, last time, the belly of the whale, the complete collapse of everything the hero knows and understands as she or he drops into darkness, confusion, and despair. But as we pointed out, every womb becomes a tomb, and there is always the rebirth. And then you find yourself in the initiation phase, the second of the 3 main phases on the monomyth cycle. And that's where we begin today. So we're going to divide the center of third, the initiation phase, into 2 videos, this video and video 4 next time. There are 6 substages in the initiation phase. We're going to do the first 3 today, and the road of trials, the meeting with the goddess, and woman as temptress. So again, let's get started. We're still looking at everything through those 3 lenses too. The literal lens, what's actually happening in that moment in the story. The psychological lens, which is so rich for Campbell, isn't it? The belly of the whale in Star Wars, maybe Luke and Leia and Han and Chewbacca literally falling into that disgusting trash compactor in the Death Star. But psychologically, descending into the belly of the whale is to descend into the unconscious, to fall deep into the unknown inner realm, which we always carry around with us, but outward turn, we're oblivious to it. And the crises of the hero's journey through the psychological lens again drives us deeper and deeper in. And so through that Jungian, Joseph Campbell kind of approach, the myth is so good at encapsulating that inward journey that we must all take, because in the end, the hero's journey looks on the surface like we're going out and coming back, but psychologically we're going in. Just as Jesus in the Christian story died on the cross and descended to hell. Talk about a belly of the whale. He went all the way down, and after 3 days emerged and came back to life and out of the tomb. So that is the really turning point between that departure phase and now where we are here in the initiation phase. So let's talk about the road of trials. And again, of course, we're here to study Joseph Campbell's essential book, Hero with 1,000 Faces. And we're going through the 3 phases and the 17 substages of that remarkable schematic that Campbell left us. Again, a few caveats. I think we all know not all 17 of these substages appear in every story. Campbell never said they did. Nobody's saying they did. But this is like the menu from which storytellers draw and put together the components of the monomyth of the hero's journey. So the road of trials, let's turn our gaze to that. This is the single substage of all 17 that gets the most attention. This is what we think of first when you even hear the word hero. You know, journeys and quests and ordeals and trials and tests and riddles and impossible tasks. Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion are given this apparently pointless task of going to the Wicked Witch of the West and grabbing her broom. Now there's an impossible task for you. It's the most fearsome thing in all of Oz. And yet they say, oh, you want us to get the broom? Okay, off we go. So there's an impossible task. Again, Frodo having to destroy the ring. The 12 labors of Hercules. Not one of them seems humanly possible, but of course he does them all. Gilgamesh's quest for immortality in the oldest story on earth, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Again and again and again, when we think of the hero's journey, we think of these amazing, heart-stopping, blood-pumping, crazy, high-risk endeavors. That's the fun stuff. And frankly, most films and pop fiction, novels and comic books and games, most of them just deal with this one phase of the 17, this one substage, running around doing crazy stuff and killing monsters and all that. So, but again, through the psychological and maybe even the philosophical or spiritual lens, whenever you and I face an ordeal, we are on the road of trials. Again, we have to keep remembering that line from Campbell that each of us is the hero of our own lives. And the reason that we connect so powerfully with these protagonists is because of mirror neurons, right? Our brain actually, we feel like we're fighting the dragon too, or we're running from the monster too. So that's the literary connective tissue that makes these myth stories, these hero stories, so potent. Now, the good news is that as you enter the road of trials, you got a couple things going for you. And let me jump into Campbell here. I'm just going to read the first paragraph of the initiation section. It's really good, and I want to touch on what Campbell shares with us here. So this is the first thing he says about the road of trials. Once having traversed the threshold, the hero moves in a dream landscape of curiously fluid, ambiguous forms, where he must survive a succession of trials. This is a favorite phase of the myth adventure. It has produced a world literature of miraculous tests and ordeals. The hero is covertly aided by the advice, amulets, and secret agents of the supernatural helper whom he met before his entrance into this region. Or it may be that he here discovers for the first time that there is a benign power everywhere supporting him or her in this superhuman passage. So there's that idea again. You don't have to go it alone. Frodo's got Gandalf and the whole fellowship around him. And of course, you and I have, once we say the holy word yes and truly enter into this ordeal, we have, of course, the whole universe, the whole cosmos, all of nature conspires in our favor if we're committed truly to the work ahead. That's the responsiveness of the cosmos. That the theists, that the religious people, Christians, Jews, and Muslims will say, if you want something from God, just ask. If you have the faith to believe that it can be given, and if you surrender to the abundance of the divine, whether it's a personified God or the will of nature itself, of stoicism, however you conceptualize it, once you say yes and commit, the support shows up. Now, the hero often fails these tasks, and these tasks often come in threes, and the hero makes a lot of mistakes and just about gets killed a bunch of times. And there's another interesting piece here that I think we need to consider, that the hero rarely travels alone. There's always at least a buddy Gilgamesh had Enkidu. Peter Fonda has Dennis Hopper in Easy Rider. Frodo has Sam, and not just Frodo and Sam, but a whole troop around them. For every Captain Kirk, there's a Spock. So for every Batman, there's a Robin. There's always the loyal friend. And on top of that, additional characters around, some kind of team. Dorothy has the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Cowardly Lion, and the four of them each plays an essential role in their collective deliverance. Frodo has Sam, of course, his absolutely essential best friend and assistant. And they show up for each other in miraculous ways. When one is collapsing, the other is strong. And when the other is collapsing, the other is strong. They each bring different strengths to it. And there are other hobbits in the Lord of the Rings, in the Fellowship, Merry and Pippin. And then there's Legolas, the elf, Gimli, the dwarf. There's Gandalf, who we already mentioned, who's the wizard. He comes in extremely handy. There's Aragorn, the ranger, who is a human being, a man, which is kind of a standout among this crowd. And of course, later, for you fans of the books and films, he of course becomes, spoiler alert, he becomes the king in Return of the King. That's a common theme in Hero's Journey stuff too, that, right among us are the superstars that events will polish up to their highest luster. Luke Skywalker, of course, has C-3PO and R2-D2 and Leia and Han and Chewbacca. And one more thing about these fellowships, two more things. One is, notice the stock character exemplified best by Han Solo in the Star Wars films, or if you prefer, Rick, Humphrey Bogart's character in the classic American film Casablanca. Both Rick in Casablanca and Han Solo, that's a stock character in mythology. It is the mercenary. This is a guy who is pure ego, pure ambition. They don't care about your stupid cause, whether it's the French resistance or the rebels trying to fight the evil empire. They just want to get paid, right? And Harrison Ford does a delightful job of playing that roguish, kind of intergalactic pirate who's in it for himself. And you can wait for it. It always comes. The transformation. The ego eventually awakens to the deeper rationale, the deeper cause, the deeper reason for helping out, just as Rick does in the climactic scene of Casablanca at the airport, where he sends, at great sacrifice to himself, he sends Ilsa, the lovely Ingrid Bergman, off with Victor Laszlo together, knowing that they should be together, not him and her. Anyway, if you haven't seen Casablanca and you don't know Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, this is probably all not making much sense. And if you haven't seen The Wizard of Oz, what am I going to do? Those are all essential cultural touchstones that I hope most of you have some passing awareness with. If not, when you're done with this, you got some films and books to catch up on. So that mercenary character is an interesting one. Now, the final thing I want to say about the fellowship dynamic has a lot to do with that mercenary piece, and it's this. When we look at these fellowships, these teams, through the psychological lens on the road of trials, what we always see, and this is a very Jungian way to put it, is that all of the characters in the fellowship are aspects of our own psyche. You are the fellowship. You are the loyal, serving sidekick. You are the rakish, egotistical, self-interested, what's in it for me guy. You are the ruthless warrior, the dwarf, the elf who kill with icy precision. You are the wizard, or the magic elixir, or the good witch in The Wizard of Oz. You are, the magical, potent channel through which the entire cosmos serves the good of the fellowship, or in this case, of the self. So what a wonderful psychological interpretive tool to start to look at buddy pictures, or fellowship pictures, stories, if you will, novels, movies, games, through that Jungian lens. And that the goal of the hero's journey in Jungian terms is to integrate, to bring all of those aspects of ourselves into unity, into harmony. And that's the purpose of the hero's journey in Jungian terms. That's this big word for him, right? Integration. So that my light side may make peace and join back together with my shadow side, instead of living in some sort of artificially construed state of conflict, to bring them all into unification and to understand that each one of those characters plays his or her part in their moment. Sometimes you need to be egotistical, right? Ambitious, a little ruthless. Sometimes you absolutely have to drop all of that and be deeply altruistic, self-sacrificial. We must do and be all of these things. So now we have another beautifully potent pedagogical point that is made by these heroes' journeys. And that's the third lens, right? The spiritual or the philosophical power of these stories, how I can move into deeper integration with my inner fellowship. Now there's also the impossible task. You know, that's key in your hero's journey. You've got to give your hero some task that just can't be done. And then they go and they do it anyway. That's the suspense, right? You're like, no, this can't be done. Every story has to have that. Whether it's Dorothy and her crew getting the most precious possession the Wicked Witch has, namely her broom. And when they get the broom doesn't do anything for them. They don't jump on it and fly away. What seems to be the psychological or philosophical meaning of that is you and I must figure out what is the thing in our universe that we are the most afraid of, that is the most dangerous, and run toward it. Run at it. Find the confidence to believe that we can own it, we can beat it, we're better than that. And once we get the broom, it's like, that was just a trinket. The transformation was the point. The way we had to uncover our wit, our strength, our faith. That is the purpose of going for the impossible task. That's the boon. I'm getting ahead of myself because we'll talk about that in the next video. But what if that's the big prize? It's not some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but the gold of the emergence of my own authentic power and willingness and strength and wisdom. So, in Star Wars, it's blowing up the Death Star. In Lord of the Rings, it's destroying the ring. And every member of the fellowship played a perfect part, and nature itself cooperates. Take that in. Take that in. Realize that when you pursue your best life, you're going to get more help than you realize. And that's how we uncover our greatest joy, our fullest strength, our authentic being. Now, on to substage 7. That's the road of trials, and that can last for ages, right? That could be a whole thing. I mean, all the Harry Potter's movies, right, are various trials over and over and over and over and over. Let's talk about substage 7, the meeting with the goddess. So remember, if the purpose of all the ordeals on the road of trials is to shatter and strip away our old sense of self, our limited and limiting self-definitions, then our meeting with the goddess is all about showing us what's possible, what the beauties of the way are, what the real power is. Sure, on the literal level, our hero sometimes meets a powerful goddess. I think of Frodo when he gets to Lothlorien, when he meets, oh gosh, her name is escaping me. I was almost going to... Galadriel, played by Cate Blanchett in the movies, right? So that's a classic kind of meeting with the goddess. So again, on the literal level, sometimes the story gives it to us that way. Galadriel is an epic figure in the elven world in Lothlorien, and she's telepathic. She's immortal, like all the elves. She's ethereal. She's beautiful. She's also dangerous. She's got that Kali Durga kind of, so she's the Madonna, the kind of a goddess figure, but she's also the goddess who will put you in the grave, who is profoundly dangerous. And that's part of what the meeting with the goddess is on a deeper, kind of more spiritual and psychological level. It's not all fun and games with the goddess. So what's behind the literal level? Let me read a section from the meeting with the goddess in Campbell's book. I'm on page 92. What is the goddess? She is the paragon of all paragons of beauty, the reply to all desire, the bliss-bestowing goal of every hero's earthly and unearthly quest. She is mother, sister, mistress, bride. Whatever in the world has lured, whatever has seemed to promise joy, has been premonitory of her existence in the deep of sleep, if not in the cities and forests of the world. She's the incarnation of the promise of perfection, the soul's assurance that at the conclusion of its exile in a world of organized inadequacies, the bliss that once was known will be known again. The comforting, the nourishing, the good mother, young and beautiful, who was known to us and even tasted in the remotest past. Time sealed her away, yet she is dwelling still like one who sleeps in timelessness at the bottom of the timeless sea. Yeah, Campbell gets pretty poetic sometimes. Well, look, he's steeped in mythology. He reads nothing but mythology and all this beautiful poetic scriptural stuff. It's going to seep into his own prose. So, wow, the goddess. We're really talking about a big thing here. And later on page 97, he says, woman in the picture language of mythology represents the totality of what can be known. And the hero is the one who comes to know, end quote. So the goddess is symbolic. Again, on the literal level in the story, it often is a literal goddess, but go bigger, pull back, because we want to gender neutralize this. The hero's journey is not just for guys meeting the goddess, right? This is for men. The journey is for men and women. It's for all of us, of all gender identifications. So what does the meeting with the goddess mean then in those conditions? It is the meeting with the entire cosmos, from the sublime, ethereal architecture of the angels down to the slime, ooze, and excrement of the swamp. A to Z, all of it. And some of it is so divinely, magically attractive, and some of it kind of smells bad and is repulsive. It is the carnal universe, the corporeal universe, and the sublime, infinitely powerful universe in which all of the opposites, all of the polarities are reconciled. That's what the goddess really is. She is, or it is, the eros gamos, the sacred marriage. And at the literal level in the hero's journey stories, the sacred marriage is the king meets the queen. Aragorn now is the king. He meets Arwen. He marries the elf who sacrifices immortality to be a human or to live in the human world. And that sacred marriage, a lot of love stories are kind of like that. If you've been fortunate in love and have partnered well with someone, you catch a glimpse of something eternal, something majestic and profound, far beyond little old you and little old him or her. So that is the cosmic significance of the goddess. At the literal level, it's sacred union with another. At the psychological level, it is, again, the integration of all the disparate and sometimes conflicting parts of the self, the fellowship, the mercenary and the altruist kind of merging into one that is neither of the two, but a third thing, fully human. And on the spiritual or philosophical level, this is union with God. This is union with the One, Buddhist enlightenment, and so on. So now, let's turn to, I think, one of the most mysterious substages, and that's the next one. I'm calling it stage 8, if you're counting from the top, woman as temptress. So frankly, these two are the most problematic in my mind, meeting with the goddess and woman as temptress. And this is where Campbell gets the most criticism, honestly. For making this all so apparently, anyway, male-centric. And I say apparently because that is really true only at the literal level, as we've been describing. The hero, but in his defense, to be fair, look at his source material. He's reading medieval mythology and world mythology from all kinds of patriarchal places, where it is, generally speaking, but certainly not always the case, the male character who is the protagonist in these hero's journey stories. But we're not stuck with that. Throw it away. I mean, this is as we've been saying, and as Campbell himself says, and I'm not going to dig up the passages in here where he says it, but this is for men and women. This journey is something every human being can take. So if you get stuck at the literal level, though, yeah, it all appears a little sexist. But I think, to me, there is enough nuance around the edges where we don't have to consign Campbell to some sort of sexist prison from the past. He's smarter than that. And he's seeing outside of that parameter, even though it was one that, being born in 1904, that he is completely ensconced in. So I think Campbell himself kind of shortchanges this stage, the woman as temptress stage. It's only 4 pages long in this big, huge book. But there's still some significant things I want to think about here in this particular stage. Now, on the literal level, what is woman as temptress about? It's about temptation. It's about the hero being exhausted and being nearly dead a dozen times by the time they get here. And they just want to fall into a soft bed, have a nice hot meal, have a bath. These temptations are often carnal, but they're always corporeal. They're always sensual. They're always physical. The hero gets lured away from the rightful quest by some temptation, by some food, some comfort, some pleasure. And yeah, in the classic, again, literal sense, some of the examples Campbell cites in this very brief section are of saints, Roman Catholic saints, and the Desert Fathers, Saint Anthony, the first monastics in the 3rd, 4th century, the first Christian men, and a lot of women too, who went out in the desert to live austere, celibate lives and pray and do all that monastic stuff. And the way they were tormented by lust, it was the big, big problem for monastics of any tradition. So that's a kind of a handy dandy example, right? Of woman as temptress, of sex and pleasure as a potentially disruptive or destructive distraction, to where you're trying to go, oh, look at that. So that is obviously kind of a simple problem to understand. All of us who have bodies know all about this. So let's look at it psychologically, though. The acknowledgement that, yes, sex is a really beautiful, loving, and literally life-giving thing. A profound part of real intimacy in loving relationships. Sex good. But on the shadow side, I think all of you know, we all know, that sex can be profoundly destructive. Who here has not been led by lust into episodes that were maybe not the proudest moments of your life? And I'm maybe understating it there, and that's as specific as I need to get. I'll just leave this here. But I think we understand that being human is to have under the hood here all kinds of really powerful forces. In India, we call them the chakras, the 7 chakras up the kundalini, the serpent energy. And, you know, they all have really powerful, positive roles to play. Talk about a fellowship. But each one of them has its shadow side and can turn into a destructive distraction that throws the hero off the quest and gets us stuck in an eddy, gets us stuck in a backwater, not of self-realization, but of dissolution and decay. So those are the 3 sub-stages that we wanted to look at today: the road of trials, the meeting with the goddess, and woman as temptress. Up on deck for our next video, the atonement with the Father, apotheosis, and the ultimate boon, where the whole hero's journey has been headed all along. So that's the second half of the initiation phase, that whole bottom half of the circle of the monomyth. So I'm really looking forward to those. There's some fireworks going to go off when we talk about the atonement with the Father, the apotheosis, and the ultimate boon. So thanks for being here. I'll see you all in video 4 of the hero's journey.